Hey guys, it's Emily. I'm the pastor at Skycrest United Methodist Church. This is really a video for our congregation to learn more about what's going on right now in our denomination. Before all this news of coronavirus to worry about, you may have also heard news that the United Methodist Church may be facing a split in the coming year. We wanted to get some information out to our church family about that, and with church activities suspended right now, we want to do that by video so that you can be thinking it over, asking any questions you have over email or telephone, and helping us to pray about our response whenever the time comes. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes explaining how we got here, about 10 minutes on the proposal that will most likely be before our general conference when it meets. And then, since I can't take questions over one-way video, I've got some of the most common questions that we've already been asked, and I'll just take a couple moments to answer some of those, and then there will be a survey for you to complete online after you have watched this video. So how did we get here exactly? Well, Methodism came as a movement from England to America. It was formalized as a denomination in 1784. Methodism actually split over the issue of slavery in 1844. So this is not the first time we have faced a split over some sort of a social issue. Methodism came back together in 1939, but only by creating a separate group called the Central Conference for our African American congregations and pastors. We then merged together with the Evangelical United Brethren in 1968 and got rid of that discriminatory Central Conference. And that's actually where we got the name United in our United Methodist Church, was from the Evangelical United Brethren. So that is a little bit of background about our denomination and some of the splits that we have faced in the past. In 1972, as homosexuality was becoming more in the public eye, legislation was proposed and approved at our general conference to state the phrase that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Since then, at general conferences, those specifics have expanded to state several things. The first is that all persons are of sacred worth, and that anyone can participate without restrictions in our churches as members and in our ministries. The second rule that we are given is that no homosexual weddings can be officiated by our members or practiced in our churches. The third says that no self-avowed practicing homosexuals, is how they phrase it, can be ordained as clergy in our denomination. And that these things are chargeable offenses for pastors, meaning that pastors could lose their ordination by breaking these rules. So those are some of the rules that we have had, mainly since 1972 onward. And as the tide has kind of turned in our culture, tensions have mounted over this issue really throughout the 2000s, and specifically at our general conferences. Our denomination is governed by a general conference, which is a legislative body that meets every 4 years. It has about 800 representatives total, delegates that come from all over the world. So a lot of people think that I am personally going to go to General Conference to represent Skycrest. That's not how it works. We have 9 clergy and 9 lay members that were elected as delegates to represent the entire Florida annual conference. So I will not personally be there voting on behalf of Skycrest. We've got 18 folks who are going as a team on behalf of all of Florida. So as these tensions have been mounting, it's really because more and more people, many in the U.S. and others abroad, have come to believe that we can read those passages about homosexuality differently, that there are ways to interpret those that don't mean exactly maybe we thought they meant in the past. So more and more people have come to believe that maybe we should change those rules, that maybe the rules we have are discriminatory, that perhaps it is not, after all, a sin to be a self-avowed practicing homosexual, that perhaps it is not, after all, incompatible with Christian teaching. So as more and more people have come to believe that and would like to change our rules, the tide has also shifted in a different way, because our representatives who go to our general conference are elected proportionally by membership. And so places like the U.S., where the membership of the United Methodist Church is declining, is kind of being counteracted by places in the United Methodist Church where our membership is growing. Places like Sierra Leone, Katanga, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Congo, places like that, where the membership is growing rapidly, and those places do tend to be more conservative on this issue. So we've got two tides canceling each other out and really creating a lot of protests, a lot of conflicts. Throughout the 2000s, it's gotten to where there are whole groups just not obeying these rules. There are caucus groups with many professional staff who work on this issue on both sides full-time. And another thing to know is that churches cannot simply just walk away if they don't like the rules, because our properties are held in trust by the annual conference and by the denomination. So that's why these fights have seemed to escalate and continue all these years. By 2016 General Conference, it essentially broke down. The fighting had gotten too bad, and a group of delegates went to the mic and asked our bishops to please lead us out of this mess. They said, we can't keep doing this anymore. The bishops appointed a commission on a way forward, and they called a special session of General Conference in 2019. So for those couple of years, the Commission on the Way Forward worked on a variety of different plans that might have split our denomination maybe under an umbrella organization into several different groups, or some plans, like you might remember hearing about the One Church plan that would have let every congregation decide for themselves. There was also a plan that the Commission did not finish or approve called the Traditional Plan, which said that we would keep the restrictions and strengthen the punishments, that would be the way to get everyone in line, following the rules, and that would be their plan to put a stop to this fighting. So the commission did not bring this plan forward, but several of the authors decided to, saying that every pastor who breaks these rules would lose their job, that every newly ordained person would have to sign and certify that they would obey, just kind of strengthening the punishments and tightening the language to make sure that everyone would get in line. Well, the special session of 2019 General Conference came last year, and really to everyone's surprise, the traditional plan was approved, 438 to 384. And do you think that it worked and that everyone just fell in line and started obeying the rules and stopped protesting and stopped complaining? No. The opposite of that is really what happens. And it's because those who had maybe been sitting on the sidelines and feeling for a while like, well, we maybe could read the scriptures differently, maybe we'd like to be more open and accepting, but they hadn't wanted to break the rules. The traditional plan really started a groundswell among those centrist, moderate folks who said, you know what? I won't obey. Put me on trial, take my job if you have to, but I won't obey these rules anymore because I feel that they are discriminatory. So if anything, the fighting on all sides got worse. Going into 2020 General Conference, which is scheduled for early May of this year, but we do anticipate, because it's a world travel event, that it will be somewhat postponed by the coronavirus, but it'll happen when it happens. Going into whenever our 2020 General Conference will be, everyone agreed we can't keep doing this. We need a plan to separate our denomination fairly and peacefully so that we can all get back to doing the ministries we believe God has called us to. So no one on any side of this issue is really talking about keeping the United Methodist Church together at this point. All the plans being worked on are to split us up one way or another, really. So all the plans that had been submitted kind of, looked similar, but they had their differences until in early January, we heard of something called. Oh, this is a shot of General Conference 2019. You see a couple of our Florida delegates here, along with some of our worldwide bishops, praying and crying together when the traditional plan was approved and protests erupted all over. So this thing that emerged in January that will be legislation in 2020 is called the Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation. It came from Bishop John Yambasu from Sierra Leone. He said that God put it on his heart to get a group of diverse persons together from all sides of the issue to hammer out a compromise. They were able to get renowned mediator Kenneth Feinberg and a team of 15 or so people representing the far left, the far right, and everything in between. There are bishops, lay members, clergy, someone from every continent of United Methodism. These are some of the key leaders of all of these different caucus groups all came together for this mediation process. And what they have come up with, as I said, is a protocol for grace and reconciliation through separation. They are turning this into legislation, and all of these folks have agreed to stop supporting their own plans and only support the protocol going forward. So everything that I'm going to say from this point onward is preceded by if the protocol passes at General Conference, because I do believe that some version of it will pass, maybe with amendments, but in some form, I think this is the reality of what we're looking at in the coming year. So if the protocol passes, whenever General Conference happens, here is how it would go. Traditionalists, which is kind of how they refer to themselves, those who would prefer to keep the restrictions against gay weddings and gay clergy, traditional on this issue, those folks, some of them anyway, will leave to form a new Methodist denomination. They've been planning this for some time. They've got an organization called the Wesleyan Covenant Association that's been working on this plan for several years. They've got a book of discipline ready to go and plans for leadership. They will be able, if this protocol passes, to be able to leave with their church properties. Pastors will be able to keep their pensions. They will be able to keep their assets. And they will be given $25 million in startup funds, which makes sense because they have paid apportionments, just like all of us have, into our denomination for years. So they would be given some of that money to leave as a blessing to say, we want you to go and start what you believe is right in a separate denomination and have some money to help that to be successful. Those of us who remain would be referred to for a while now. It's probably not the best name, but referred to in this document anyway as the Post-Separation United Methodist Church. So if you read about that, that's what they mean, is after these folks leave to start a new denomination, those of us left are the Post-Separation UMC. The protocol then states that the Post-Separation UMC would do two things. First, they would organize into regional conferences. That would allow us to have some differences in how things are done in Africa versus the Philippines versus Europe versus the United States. It would allow for some cultural differences to do ministry with different people in slightly different ways. And then at least the U.S. Regional Conference would repeal the traditional plan and remove all restrictions against gay weddings and gay ordinations. So those words about incompatible with Christian teaching, those chargeable offenses, those rules would then be taken out, at least for the U.S. region, of our rule book. So that's kind of the idea. Does this mean that if you personally are a traditionalist on this issue that you have to leave and go with these folks forming a new denomination? No, it does not. We will talk about local churches and about your membership and your choices in that in a moment. It means simply that some people have decided that they are leaving and starting a new denomination, and that the Post-Separation UMC would remove the restrictions. So then here's kind of how this will filter down a little bit to the local level, first the annual conferences, and then the church. So how voting happens is that annual conferences and local churches, the default is that we remain United Methodist. We remain Post-Separation UMC unless an annual conference chooses by a vote to leave and affiliate with a new Methodist denomination instead. So we are a part of the Florida Annual Conference. The default, if we do nothing, is that we remain part of the Post-Separation UMC. If our annual conference deems by a vote that we do not want to do that we want to leave, we can affiliate instead with a new Methodist denomination. 20% of our delegates are needed to call for a vote, and the vote would have to pass with a 57% threshold in order to leave the UMC and affiliate with a new denomination instead. If our annual conference were to do that, all of the churches in Florida would then by default do what their annual conference has decided, unless they choose as an individual local church to go the other way and stay with the Post-Separation UMC instead. But the first level of decision making is at the annual conference level. I can tell you I don't believe that Florida has a 57% threshold to leave the denomination. Based on recent voting for delegates to General and Jurisdictional Conference alone, I don't think there's any way that our vote would reach that 57% threshold. I fully believe that Florida will remain part of the post-separation UMC. Right now, they're saying annual conferences would have until July 2021 to depart if they choose. That timeline, again, if our meetings are delayed this summer because of the virus, those timelines may change. But right now, they're giving annual conferences about a year to decide. We believe that Florida would stay with the post-separation UMC, restrictions against gay weddings and gay clergy removed. And then here's how that comes down to the local church level. The default for local churches is to stay with their annual conference. If they don't like what their annual conference chose, they can vote instead to go with another Methodist denomination. So let's say Florida stays UMC. Our leadership board would be the group in our local church to call for a vote if they believe we need to vote. No vote is required. This was very important to those who have formed these plans and protocols. They did not want to pit church members against each other. You in our congregation have been of different mindsets and have worshiped side by side, sometimes for 40, 50 years right here in this church. We have got folks who are traditional on this issue and progressive on this issue, maybe have a gay or lesbian relative right next to each other in the pews with no problem for decade after decade. So those who made these plans didn't want to pit us against each other with a vote unless the church decides that a vote is needed. If a vote is needed, it would be done as a church conference, which means all professing members can vote. It means that the DS would come and preside, so we don't just get to call a vote every single Sunday after church about this by show of hands for whoever's there that day. The DS would come and preside. It would be announced for several weeks in writing ahead of time. You would have chances to read the written material ahead of time and all of that. Our leadership board functions as our church council. And so our board would set the threshold for how many votes we would need to leave the denomination or to make a different selection than our annual conference has made. We can set it at either a majority, so 51%, or 2/3. I personally would recommend 2/3. I don't think you leave a denomination with 51%. The church would not have enough strength to sustain itself if we lost half of our members over a contentious vote like that. So I would strongly recommend, and that's what our bishop and leaders are recommending, that churches set the threshold at 2/3 to make a different selection than what their annual conference has made. Churches have till the end of 2024 to depart the denomination or to choose a different affiliation than their annual conference has selected if they're going to do that. They would be able to keep their properties, their assets, everything as part of this deal if they do it before the end of 2024. Realistically, what I see happening in Florida, I do see our annual conference probably calling for a vote, but ultimately deciding to stay with the post-separation UMC. So I believe that then that choice would come down to Skycrest for us to be prayerfully considering. Other parts of the protocol, there's lots more. It's really long. You can look it up and read it for yourself if you're interested, but just a couple of other interesting facts about it is that the complaint processes, so if anyone in our denomination is on trial or under complaints for issues related to this topic, their complaints are basically on pause through 2024 until we get all of this worked out. And a really nice thing is that money is set aside, supported by any new Methodist denominations that are created, as well as the post-separation UMC, that will continue together to support the racial justice ministries, things like Africa University, things like mission projects around the world. We will continue to fund those together so that those programs don't suffer simply because we are dividing over this issue. So those will be funded by all parties. So some of the questions that we've gotten about this. Some people have asked me, why is it the traditionalists who are leaving when they've been winning the votes? That's the question everybody seems to want to know. Our bishop answered that in a meeting just like this one by saying, and he was at the protocol negotiations, he said it was at their request. They've been making the plans to leave. They felt that those who were disobeying these rules would continue disobeying, and they did not want to exist in a church where these rules were being broken or where gay weddings and gay clergy would be allowed. So it was at their request that they've chosen to leave. They do plan to change other things besides just keeping these restrictions. They are taking this opportunity to change quite a few different things about Methodism that will be different in their Wesley Covenant Association new traditionalist denomination. People have asked, will this affect apportionments? The rather significant amount of money that we as a church pay in support of our denominational programs. Will our apportionments go up? Possibly, yes, but no matter which denomination we join. We don't choose a new affiliation in order to save some money. That's not how we're going to decide. It is possible that if there are less churches in the post-separation UMC, that our costs per church might go up a little bit. But our annual conference is working really hard to drastically reduce our budget to prepare in advance for that happening. Skycrest has always been financially smart. We are in a good position. We have no debt. We do not let finances need to be the cart driving the horse on this decision. People have asked, will this create a problem with pastoral appointments? Right? They assign pastors to a church. If a church chooses to leave the denomination, but their pastor wants to stay, they now are mismatched. They are now not in the same denomination anymore. That church would need a new pastor from their new denomination, and that pastor would need a new appointment within the United Methodist Church. So it will create a bit of a spaghetti noodle kind of plot of appointment making, but they are already kind of projecting that. And in reality, they already take that into account now, matching like-minded pastors with like-minded churches as much as possible. People have asked me about another new denomination being formed in Florida. You may have seen news recently that a couple of our district superintendents and Florida Methodist leaders filed corporation articles to start another new traditionalist denomination that is not a part of this Wesley Covenant Association one being started. So yes, there seems to be something else new also coming in Florida. I fully believe that both of these new denominations and maybe others will probably be around in our area, reaching out to churches, possibly recruiting, trying to get us to consider joining their movements. That's a big reason that even in the midst of this virus, I wanted to get folks informed about this, because I do believe we'll be hearing from these groups. Another question people have asked me quite a bit is, do I think that we will get dozens of gay wedding requests as a publicity stunt after all of this is approved? And the answer is no, I don't think that that will happen. We are one of the last mainline denominations to deal with this issue. The number of gay wedding requests that I have ever gotten from people that I don't personally know is zero. None in 15 years have I gotten from a gay couple that I don't know saying, hey, can we have your wedding as a publicity stunt at your church? I don't see it happening. If it hasn't happened in 15 years, I don't see it happening in the post-separation UMC. This is just most of the country and most other denominations have moved beyond this a decade or more ago. I don't see this creating that kind of publicity for us. The people who would ask us for weddings would be members of our congregation, your sons, your daughters, your grandchildren, your close friends. And I would be happy to serve as their pastor as the rules allow. I would love that opportunity. So that just kind of brings it to me personally. And then we've got a survey for you to take as you have made it to the end of this video. So me personally, I believe that these restrictions should be lifted, and that LGBTQ plus persons should be allowed to marry in our church and be ordained in ministry if God has called them. I don't believe it's a sin to be gay, lesbian, transgender, etc. And so I do believe that these restrictions are discriminatory and wrong. If you disagree, we've probably talked. We can talk. There is no reason that you need to leave our church because we disagree, because we've probably disagreed for the last 7 years and gotten along great and done great ministry together. Nothing day to day here at Skycrest will change. We have a mission here that includes welcoming all people, But it doesn't stop with that. We're not a one-issue church. Our mission is to connect people, all people, to God, each other, and the world. If you love God and you want to participate in that mission, I want you as part of our church, and I'm going to try to keep you here because I believe that we are better when we are all together in community. Couple more places you can get some more information about this. The assistant to the bishop, Alex Shanks, is going around to the districts. He knows a lot more about this than I do. He can answer all your detailed questions. These meetings will be Thursday, April 23rd. There's an 11 a.m. This is actually our clergy meeting, so I'd be happy to drive anyone who wants to attend. There's a 7 p.m. option also at First Lakeland. If you want to get to one of these meetings and you can't drive yourself there, provided that we can travel and meetings are happening by then, I'll be happy to get you there. They also say there will be webinars from the bishop offered before and after General Conference, which again is scheduled for May, but probably postponed. But the webinars will still happen as the meetings are happening. So there's plenty of time to learn more. We are doing a little bit of polling. This is going to be a one-question survey. And after I explain the categories, it's going to show you where you can go to take that survey. So there's two different phrases you're going to see here. It's going to be 4 categories. One says traditional and the other says progressive. And that doesn't mean Democrat or Republican or how you're going to vote in the election. It means traditionalist on this issue or progressive on this issue. Traditionalist would mean I'd like to keep these restrictions. I don't want to see gay weddings or gay clergy in our church. Progressive means you'd like to remove the restrictions and you would like to see gay weddings, gay clergy in our church. So that's the first word that you're going to see here. The second word you're going to see there either says compatible or non-compatible. And that has to do with, could you be a member in a church that does not share your same opinion on this? So if you are traditional and non-compatible, that's the phrasing that we're using to mean that you are traditional on this issue and you feel so strongly about it, it's so core to your beliefs that you could not attend a church that would have gay weddings and clergy. So that's the option you're going to select if you are traditional on this issue and could not continue in membership in a church that allowed these things. The next category says I'm traditional on this issue. Yeah, I'd like to keep the restrictions, but I'm compatible. I sure could attend a church that would allow gay weddings and clergy. Maybe you think I just won't come to the weddings, or I can just agree to disagree about this topic. So that would be the category you would choose if you're traditional on this issue, but you're compatible. You'd stay a part of the church if we went a different way. This next category says I am progressive on this issue, meaning, and that's me, I'm progressive on this issue. I would like to remove these restrictions against gay weddings and gay clergy. I think those restrictions need to go away. So I'm progressive on this issue. This category says non-compatible, and this means, and I could not attend a church that would not allow gay weddings and clergy. So you're progressive on this issue, and you're leaving if we go the other direction. Last category says I'm progressive and compatible. I'm progressive on this issue, but I will stay. I will attend a church even if it does not match my views on this issue. The reasons that we're doing this are really just to kind of take the temperature of the congregation. We've thought for a time that we knew how most people felt about this, but we know that the people we hear from are the ones with the strongest opinions and the ones who are comfortable speaking out. So this is a totally anonymous poll, simply just trying to take the temperature of the congregation and let us do some forecasting for us to get a sense of whether a vote will be needed and to get a sense of how it might go if a vote does come, how many people may need to leave our church if they don't feel we can be a part, if they don't feel they can be a part of whatever we decide. So we're going to ask you to go to this website. There would have been a paper survey had we been in person tonight, but thanks to the coronavirus, you're going to have an opportunity to take this survey online. You're going to go to www.rebrand.ly/Skycrest. If you have trouble with the link, you email me at emily@skycrest.net, and I'll send you a clickable link in your email. I'm going to ask you to fill this survey out one time and one time only. Not fair filling out 40 different copies. I'm going to ask you to only fill it out if you are a regular attender of our congregation. We know you might feel very passionate about this, but we don't need you to forward this survey to friends, family, folks in other churches who are not a part of our Skycrest family. It was a priority to keep this survey anonymous, so we're not collecting email addresses along with the survey, which means we have no way really to know if you're submitting multiple responses. So we're just really asking you to keep this survey within the Skycrest family, to take it once and only once, and hopefully that will get our leadership board some good information for planning for the future. I love every single one of you who is a part of our congregation, no matter what you believe on this topic, and I am so happy to sit down or talk with you on the phone or over email if you have questions or you want to go deeper into this topic. Thanks so much for watching. Good night.